Hello, my Bill 5000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with another Coffeehouse Crime. This one was titled The Morbidly Dark Secret Behind Kolkata's House of Horrors. I think I pronounced that right. If I didn't, then I didn't. I don't know. My bad. All right, let's go ahead and get into this story. Go ahead, turn them lights down low, put on something comfy, couple, someone special. Oh, let's get mysterious.
Deep in the city of Kolkata, a house with many hauntingly dark secrets could be found. Skeletons, mysterious voices, and diaries of complicated relationships filled its many rooms. And when officers eventually learned of the home's morbid reality within, it simultaneously intrigued and horrified a nation. The discovery of this so-called evil home would come at a cost, claiming the life of another resident. And sadly, more would follow in the years after, almost as if the place had an inescapable curse. But what precisely happened in Kolkata's House of Horrors? Who were its victims? And how long did their nightmare go on for? Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, folks. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime. Now today we're heading...
Thank you for having me, my friend. It was great to be back. I'll take a coffee. Cream, 2 sugars, please.
Back to India to look at Kolkata's House of Horrors. Now this one is both something entirely bizarre and in a lot of ways completely heartbreaking. And the more the story develops, the more shocking and saddening it becomes. Now in case you didn't know, Coffeehouse Crime is all about true crime, strange and chilling stories. And the best way that you can support me is by subscribing to this channel. So, if you'd like to see more darkly fascinating content from all around the world, then please hit subscribe now. By the way, I respond to most comments within the first hour of my video going live, so if you'd like to catch me for a question or just simply say hi, please remember to hit that bell notification too. Okay, and now with that out the way, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Kolkata's House of Horrors.
Let's do it. Oh my god. I love House of Horrors. It's that time of year, people. Let's get horrified.
Namaste, folks. Our case today takes us to the beautiful land of India. And with this case taking us to the eastern tip of the country, I should say Namaskar. There are literally thousands of interesting facts I could say about India, and even then would only be scratching the surface. So let's focus on a few of the most interesting aspects. As the title of today's video would say,
that was freaking beautiful. I want to go there.
suggest, we're here to focus on the bustling city of Kolkata. Affectionately known as the City of Joy, it's the third largest metropolitan settlement in India, with Bengali being one of the 2 primary spoken languages. Famous for its impressive colonial and religious structures, sprawling city parks, and expansive transport system, it is well equipped with delicious street food and many green spaces to enjoy the intense Indian sun. Interesting fact, but out of more than 600 cities around the world, Kolkata is worryingly ranked 7th in a global assessment of natural disaster risk. This includes the possibility of earthquakes, storms, storm surges, tsunamis, and river floods.
Damn.
And shockingly,
That's
Kolkata
awful.
has 18 million residents at risk of death by these disasters.
Holy
Life here
shit.
is fast-paced. It can be chaotic with its busy streets, expansive apartment buildings, and massive crowds of people at every single turn. However, you can find
They have to be very skilled drivers. And do you see them people on them little mopeds and shit just going down through there like beep, 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 like a little ping pong ball through all them people not even touching on one? That's some crazy shit, bruh. I wouldn't do that. I'd hit them. Not because I want to, but because it happened.
the occasional sanctuary away from the hustle and bustle of the city. And let me tell you, that very much was the case for the house and family living at number 3 Robinson Street. Nestled amongst winding streets and trees in what is known to be a more upmarket area of Kolkata, the house was large, painted bright red, and hosted a very unique family.
Okay.
The Day family consisted of 77-year-old retired man Arabindo Day, his 49-year-old daughter named Debjani Day, and his 44-year-old son named Partha Day. Both children had achieved a bachelor's degree in technology, and while Partha ended up pursuing a career in this field, Debjani found herself teaching music at a local high school. Debjani was extremely passionate about her job, and although she was known by her students to exercise discipline quite often, they also enjoyed being in her classroom, and she was often seen playing the grand piano piano at the beginning of lessons until everyone was seated. Now, Partha was much more reserved than his sister. He never veered off course from his degree and was generally very obedient to his parents. However, in stark contrast to this, he and his mother, named Arati, often argued about the not-so-small matter of marriage. Partha seemed to have no drive to find a wife, which, understandably, in Indian culture frustrated his family. He and Arati would often argue about this, and his lack of ambition even convinced her that her son was impotent. As is quite typical in Indian culture, and being the only son in the family, it was extremely important that Partha found a wife and children of his own. The house at number 3 Robinson Street had been passed down through many generations of the Day family, and Arati was hoping that many more generations would come to reside in the same 4 walls of this home.
Is it not a good thing there to like another feller if you're a feller? Maybe it's not the fact that he doesn't want a wife. Maybe he's just not attracted to the ladies. Is that taboo there? Probably. Gotta have a wife and kids. It's a stupid moment. He even said, being the only son, it's imperative that he has a wife and kids, so I should have known. I don't even know why I asked.
So, a bit of background on the house. Aurobindo and his wife moved here in 1989, and although they shared a wall with his brother who lived next door, their relationship could only be described as rocky and troubled. So despite being less than a stone's throw away from each other, the two families actually rarely spoke at all. After 16 years of living in the house, Aurobindo's wife Arati tragically passed away in the year 2005. Leaving him and their 2 children to carry on with their lives without her. By the time their mother had passed away, both Debjani and Partha were fully independent and employed adults. In fact, Partha had even moved to the US to work for Tata Consultancy, whereas Debjani moved across the city to work in another new school. Sadly though, both siblings decided to quit their jobs and move back to the family home only 2 years later, after learning that their father was suffering from tuberculosis.
Damn,
By the year of
bro.
2007, the entire family of 3 were now unemployed or retired, and they
They're
were
having
able
a
to
shit
just
time of
about
it.
financially survive by renting out the bottom floor of their home. Sadly, as the years passed by, the home fell into increasingly bad disrepair. There was no doubt that the family seemed to be incapable of getting past their grief, and to add to this, they were becoming increasingly reclusive and depressed. In fact, the only other sort of company that they had were from 2 black Labradors that were kept shut away inside of them at all times of the day. As with many people in India, religion plays a vital part in people's everyday lives, and for this family, they heavily relied on their Christian values to feel connected to something. The Day family were devoted watchers of American televangelists, and would make sure to financially contribute to them every single day. Sadly, but eventually, the 3 had no connection at all to the outside world. Now, a security guard was known to regularly bring the family food, but even still, he would have no connection to the family, instead leaving their food outside for them to collect. No one exactly knew how the family lived inside their own home, and this would stay a mystery for quite a long period of time. The Day family lived this way for 8 grueling long years. They remained holed up in their house, refused to go outside, and even refused to interact with the world in any sort of way. Now, of course,
Why?
they picked up very strange and worrying habits in this time frame, but all of this
All because the mother died? That's crazy. I mean, I get completely shutting down, but all of them just for 8 years is...
was behind firmly
That's
closed
awful.
doors, so no one really knew what was going on. But in June of 2015, and following a very sudden event, the spotlight would shine on their morbid way of living for some very gruesome reasons. And their story was so shocking that it immediately became the subject of national news. It was on the afternoon of June the 11th, 2015, that Kolkata Police Department received numerous calls about a strange plume of smoke coming from Robinson Street. Now, it is fairly normal to see smoke coming from neighbourhoods of Indian cities, be it from a street vendor, restaurant, or even garbage disposal. But with the smoke coming out from the window of a residential apartment, this was unusual. Responding officers were met with 44-year-old Partho Day, who allowed them to enter the property. Though, concerningly, he was unaware of the smoke billowing out from his own home, which initially struck the officers as strange. After entering the property, it became obvious to officers that the house was both well lived in and not lived in at all, because although the entire place was cluttered, a layer of dust covered many areas. A low, droning voice could be heard from every single room of the house, coming from a speaker system that played the voice of a televangelist at a rather low volume. Their obvious obsession with religion spread to the rest of the home too, because officers found more than 20,000 spiritual books stacked throughout the apartment. Despite these strange details, their concern was not with the apartment itself, but with the source of the smoke. And after narrowing it down, they realized it was coming from the bathroom of the large first-floor apartment. Upon trying to open the door, they learned that it was locked from the inside, and after forcing their way in, police officers were met with a horrific scene. Lying within the bath lay the charred remains of Arabindo Day. He was curled up in the corner of the bathtub with an empty can of gasoline beside him. Next to him was a handwritten note which said, "I am leaving this world by my own free will. No one is to blame. I am 77 years old. Bless you all. Goodbye, Partho. Love you, love you." There was no sign or evidence of foul play at the scene, and after a thorough examination, the handwriting was confirmed to be that of Arabindo Day. Interestingly enough, he only spoke about his son and not his daughter, Debjani. Partho was devastated at the discovery of his father, not even aware of his father's decision to die until it was all too late. The event was concluded as a sad tragedy of a man who wanted to leave the world on his own terms and not his body's. Arabindo's body was removed in a large black coffin, and with Partha being so upset by the events, a routine welfare check was scheduled.
Oh god. This is gonna get bad, ain't it?
As we know, it wasn't just Partha and Arabindo living in that house, so the next obvious question is, where was Debjani? Due to their reclusive lifestyle, nobody actually knew where she was, but nobody seemed bothered to ask either. And without that question coming up to the officers, Partha went back to his lonely, shut-in life. That would be for a while at least. Following his father's death, Partha's behaviour became even more peculiar. He would try to avoid all contact with the police, limit them to the front room, and hide in his bedroom for many hours at a time, most especially the evenings. Eventually, the authorities thought that he was acting so erratically that they deemed him to be a danger to himself and brought him in for questioning and support. While down at the police station, a chief officer confronted him. He asked Partha what the shiftiness was for, and after asking Partha to talk to him like a brother, he finally got something out of him. Partha softly said, "I may have committed something that may be a crime in the eyes of the law, but I did it because I loved my sister and my dogs, and I couldn't let them go." Of course, anyone hearing this would be concerned. It was a bizarre and worrying thing to say, especially from a soft-spoken recluse who had just lost his father. 2 officers were immediately dispatched to the house for a second inspection.
Did he kill the
Partha
puppies?
remained in custody at the local station. Authorities had no real reason to explore the home on their first visit, but upon their second time around, it became rather evident that there were further horrors hidden within the walls of 3 Robinson Street.
Oh fuck, hold on.
The officer
Oh fuck, there's still 12 minutes left. It's gonna get shit.
Officers made their way towards one of the rooms that Partha was particularly protective over, that being the same one that he had previously refused them to enter. As they did, the unmistakable stench of decay flooded from the room, and after opening the door, the squad were met with darkness. The curtains were drawn, and there were clothes and debris tucked into every nook and cranny of the room, thus trapping in the awful smell that surrounded them. Open containers of food littered the floor, all in various stages of decomposition. Lying in the center was a bed, and at the end of it was a pile of bones, which appeared not to be human. But the horror would only intensify, and with the officers peering up at the bed, they spotted human bones tucked under the sheets. Lying fully clothed and lovingly wrapped in blankets was the skeleton of Debjani. A row of stuffed animals was found at the headboard of the bed, neatly lined up and covered in dirt. It was evident that, although the remains were old, they were meticulously cared for. Partha Day was detained on suspicion of foul play, and although it was initially thought to be murder, this would eventually be disproven. He was instead arrested on the offense of potentially spreading infectious disease, causing a danger to life, and failing to tell the authorities of his sister's death. Eventually, Partha would confess that his sister had died 6 months prior, and just before New Year's Eve. The pile of bones found at the end of the bed were later revealed to be the family's 2 black Labradors. Both had died almost 1 year prior in August and September, and had lain at the foot of the bed ever since their deaths. According to Partha, Debjani spiraled into depression after the death of her 2 pet dogs, and was convinced that the house had some sort of spiritual curse. And after watching too much religious drivel, she was also convinced that she had to starve herself to appease God and therefore remove the curse from the home. Sadly, Debjani took her fasting way too far and ultimately starved herself to death. And even worse, her brother and father never thought to intervene. Forensic analysis would later conclude that there was no sign of trauma to her skull or the rest of her body, and that she had died purely from natural causes. And instead of informing the authorities, both Partha and his father would decide to keep it a secret from them and everyone outside the house. After doing their own investigation, it turns out that the family rarely spoke to each other at all, sometimes not even interacting for weeks at a time despite their relatively confined living situation. Following an extensive physical investigation, forensic officers would find bags and containers filled with notes throughout the property. They learned that this was the main method of communication between the family. They would pass notes to each other for nearly all forms of interaction, and all of these writings painted the picture of an extremely isolated and depressed family. As you can imagine, this case broke headlines all over India, officially being dubbed as the skeleton case. And it was so sensational, for reasons I haven't even talked about yet, that it disturbed millions of people for many months to come. When Partha was initially arrested, he was filthy and had blackened fingernails, and his hair was absolutely matted. And not to be rude, but he smelt almost as bad as the corpse he was hiding, because, horrifyingly, not only had he lived with her corpse, but he had even been sleeping in the very same bed for the last 6 months. Regretfully, Partha's unhealthy attachment did not stop there. He shared his meals with Debjani's corpse every single day, pretended to feed her, and when she obviously didn't eat, then left the discarded food on the floor. He also clothed her, bathed her decaying body, and tucked her into bed every single night. Now, there is no point in me telling you that this gravely unhealthy behavior was the telltale sign of a deeply damaged and mentally unwell individual, and it's all too obvious how broken Partha's mind and spirit was. After the world became aware of his morbid secret, Partha refused to speak to the authorities. By all senses, he both mentally and physically shut down, and if they wanted to learn anything about him or his family, they would have to simply search the apartment. It was while sorting through the family's shared notes that they discovered a diary that was written by Partha, and it's through this diary that we know most of the details already discussed in this video today. He wrote about his arguments with his mother, his sense of failure, and how Arati had tried to force him to have interactions with women that he had no interest in pursuing. And this will probably leave you feeling very uncomfortable, but he even hinted in these diaries that he and his sister had a closer relationship than that of just an innocent brother and sister. Absolutely horrendous details aside, a clearly mentally ill patient had written these notes, and so it wasn't obvious if they were in fact real or a grotesque fantasy. His father, Aravindo, also kept a diary, and within this diary he wrote about his plans to sell the property and split the profits between his daughter and his son, though sadly he never got around to it. While Partha's diary entries were scribbled and largely incoherent, his father's were well written, dated and organised, and his entries highlight how his family constantly fought their mounting depression. We can only assume that the comforting notes between Partha and Debjani and the caring, compassionate sister showed him led him to develop an unhealthy attachment to his sister, with some even speculating that this attachment eventually became romantic. Partha was a frustrated, lonely recluse whose mental health was steadily deteriorating, and he attached himself to the only form of comfort and female affection in his life. And all this time, his extended family, who lived in an attached apartment, had no idea that, on the other side of the wall, the body of their deceased niece was sharing a bed with their living nephew.
That's awful.
The legal proceedings of this case were thankfully short and straightforward. It was extremely obvious that the only remaining member of the D family needed treatment for his mental health and was therefore void of any criminal punishment. All in all, Partha had grown an incredibly unhealthy attachment to Debjani. He treated her as if she was simply sleeping, and that he was her caretaker until she woke up again. And it's unclear how long he would have kept this up if his father hadn't taken his own life in a way that alerted the outside world. Partha was ultimately put into the care of staff at Kolkata's Pavlov Mental Hospital, where he remained under round-the-clock care for quite some time. Not that he would have been able to go back to his home anyway, because after the news broke out, Kolkata's House of Horrors became somewhat of a tourist attraction. In fact, it was so popular to visit the haunted remains of the family home that the tea store opposite the house went from selling 10 drinks a day to 650. Back at the psychiatric hospital, Partha's mental health was deteriorating by the day. He would refuse to eat and was mostly incoherent and agitated. He often screamed out for Mary and Jesus and would only calm down when the workers told him that they were on their way. His erratic behavior did not stop there either. He always demanded to have someone with him at all times of the day, and would unfortunately be inappropriate to all the attending female nurses. When looking into his mental health, psychologists concluded that Partha had a form of psychosis combined with attachment and boundary issues, alongside multiple skin conditions. Partha was medicated for his psychosis and made such a miraculous U-turn that, only 1 week later, he was talking at great length about his life in the recent months and years. He would further tell doctors that he wanted to be one with God and devote his life to religion. And so, in October of that same year, he was released from hospital and put into the care of Father Rodney at the Mother House, a religious congregation in Kolkata.
The first meeting with Partho was totally by chance when the police asked that we be there when they were interrogating him. We were supposed to be a catalyst or a media via which Partho would be able to speak answers to the questions that the authorities had for him. But I remember the moment we met, it was so clear that this was not a person who needed interrogating, but someone who needed understanding. And I think from that point onwards, Partho was no longer someone who was a mystical figure surrounded in the fog of the horror house, but a very real person who could be a very real friend and who had a very real story to tell. And more than half of what the media was reporting was absolute lie. We as a society failed to accept that mental illness is something that is treatable.
While here, Partha began to recover from his past traumatic life experiences. He would organise charity events, help around the church grounds, and even plan local festivals. Slowly but surely, Partha found himself slowly integrating back into society, and eventually, he sold the house at 3 Robinson Street, before purchasing an 11th floor apartment in the Watgungi area in West Kolkata. And this, you would have thought, would have been the happy end of a very sad and tragic story of loss. But sadly, you would be gravely mistaken. Although Partha appeared to be getting better, he was still intensely struggling with his mental health behind closed doors. On February the 21st, 2017, he made a post on social media to say, "It's better to light a candle than to curse darkness," which did seem to be a testament to his improved state of mental well-being. However, the very next day came with some terrible news. I guess history likes to repeat itself. Much like that fateful day at number 3 Robinson Street, a plume of smoke was seen rising from his 11th floor apartment. Firefighters and officers who were responding to the scene had a pretty good idea what they were in for. In the same way that his father had taken his own life, Partha too was found in his apartment's bathroom. This time, there was no warning, no note, no further social media posts. Just a lonely man deciding that, through the horrors of his own life, it wasn't worth carrying on. The end of Partha's life spelt the end for the entire D family, all taken from the world by the cruel and unforgiving force of poor mental health. Arati seemed to be the glue that held the family together. Without her around, the rest of her family unit fell apart, and eventually, they would all lean on each other's deaths in one way or another. The lesson to learn from this story is one of mental health. Isolation, loneliness, and reclusiveness can all exacerbate pre-existing mental health conditions. Every family member had health issues to begin with, but their isolation from society accelerated the problem. At the end of the day, we are all a social species, and we thrive off that social interaction that we tend to get from other people. So, the moral of the story here: be kind to yourself and get out more. Now, this is more of a strange story than your typical true crime case, but it could be argued that Partha and Aurobindo were partially responsible for Debjani's death. They never thought to get Debjani to eat, and although Partha very obviously cared for his sister, he clearly did not do enough. In fact, with effective communication, all three would still be alive today. Number 3,
Well, it's not just that, it's just also that was really, really big into the religion, and she believed that this was, her way to have God forgive. I don't think even if they would have tried, anything would have ended up different there. But even you said at the beginning of the video, religion plays a very, very big role, and I'm pretty sure it would have ended up the same.
Robinson Street now houses an entirely different family, unrelated and devoid of the horrors that once filled these rooms. And I hope that these four walls now bring greater joy. Anyway folks, I think I'm gonna wrap this case up here because that's the end of the story. Thank you for making it this far. So, what do you think about this case?
I think it's sad. Mental health is nothing to be messed with. And whenever mental health and religion gets mingled together like that, it gets very dangerous, because that line most people have between their beliefs and the fantasies that come with it gets really blurred. I'm a firm believer in live your life the best way you can. Whatever you believe in, you believe in. Whatever your religion is your religion. I don't care what you believe in. You know what I mean? But I know when mental illnesses and religion go together, it is very difficult to fight one cause of the other. I really don't think this story would have had a different ending unless you could have removed the religious aspect of it, because that religious aspect of it, he would not have stepped in to make his sister stop, because that would be going against God's wishes, and he wouldn't have done that, no matter how much he loved his sister. So, man, I really enjoyed today's story. If y'all enjoyed today's story as much as I did, please go down there, leave a thumbs up. While you're down there, go on over, hit that subscribe button, become part of the Bill 5000 Nation. We do some crazy shit here, bruh. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Man, Adrian, you came in like a wrecking ball on this one, bruh. I really, really enjoyed it.